From the comfort of our living rooms all across the UK, the familiar Coronation Street set almost feels like home to a lot of us. But as darkness falls and you're walking the cobbles alone, you could be sure you just spotted a long dead character watching you from the shadows. Come and sit by me as we're getting into the history and the creepy reports of apparitions and unexplained goings on behind the scenes at Coronation Street. Hey friend, how are you doing? Are you doing good? Are you staying hydrated? If you're new around here, hello, hi, welcome. My name is Claire and I am a lover of all things morbid, mysterious and macabre. I have spent hours and hours absolutely enthralled in ghost hunting TV shows and YouTube paranormal investigations. But you know what I love more than night vision cameras and EVPs? I love the history behind a paranormal encounter, the origins of urban legends, and the real, raw, personal ghost stories of people that have experienced something weird firsthand. So that's what we're going to do. Every week we sit down and swap ghost stories like a good old sleepover. So if that's your scene, I would highly recommend that you subscribe so that you never miss one of our chats. Right, so I will preface this one by saying that almost all of the information, other than the actual history, has come from tabloid news sources and Most Haunted. I know. So I am going to say that this probably isn't a super serious one, but it's one that I really wanted to do anyway, so let's get into it. Now, when I was a kid, my mum loved watching Coronation Street. And you know when you're like a young kid and you get interested in the things that your parents like? So like every Monday and Wednesday, me and my mum would sit ourselves down in front of the TV and tune in. And this would have been like very early 2000s. I remember when Chesney first came on the scene, and Schmeichel the dog. I also remember watching the live 50th anniversary special where the tram crashed, which would have been like 2010 or something. So I was following Coronation Street for quite a long time. And then we grew up and life got busy and we stopped watching Coronation Street. But then when I was going through my Most Haunted phase and I saw that they'd visited the Coronation Street set and that apparently it was haunted as hell, I'm like, what? I couldn't believe it. But here we are, about to get into the history and the creepy goings on behind the longest running TV soap opera in the world. So Coronation Street has been a staple of everything quintessentially British for decades. Like you think of Britain, it's fish and chips, talking about the weather, and Coronation Street. And it tells the story of a street, Coronation Street to be precise, in a fictional town of Weatherfield that's based on Salford in Greater Manchester. It first aired on the 9th of December 1960 and focused on the everyday dramas of working class people that lived on the street, so their lives, relationships, struggles, and obviously deaths. And I think that that's why it's endured for so long. You grow to know these characters and the things that they're going through are so relatable for so many people. And I mean, it was at this point in my childhood when Schmeichel the dog came on the scene and I told my parents that I really wanted a dog and that I was going to feed him and look after him and walk him every day. I did not get that dog. For its first 8 years of broadcasting in the 60s, the entire set for the soap was built inside one of the studios in Manchester. All of the inside and outside parts were just in one studio. And it was pretty cramped, they'd had to shrink everything down to 3/4 scale. So the actors had to walk extra slow past the houses to make it look like the houses were as big as they were supposed to be to make the scaling make sense. In 1968, they decided to build an outside set for the street scenes, which was described as the coldest place on earth as the wind would blow directly down the street constantly. And for this reason, and combined with the fact that the set was still so cramped, the cast and crew absolutely hated filming on it. But they had to make do with it for quite a long time, as it wasn't until 1982 that a bigger outside set would take its place. The new permanent outside set was located in the back lot behind Granada Studios on Quay Street. And it was just so much better for everyone involved. The houses were almost full size now, so that they were a bit bigger, and it was just easier to film things on. And just in case you haven't understood how much Coronation Street means to the country by now, this new set was officially opened by the Queen. So now, Most Haunted, they claimed that it was built on top of a graveyard where 22,000 bodies were buried, but I didn't find any evidence of that. If anything, I actually found that someone had looked into this by cross-referencing the claims with historical photos and maps of Manchester at the time, and it's actually very unlikely that this claim is real. So there was a St. John's Church with a graveyard over the road from the studios, but there's no evidence that it ever like came across the road into what eventually would become the Coronation Street set. And even looking at maps that go back to like 1772, there still wasn't a graveyard on the Granada studio site. So I don't think there's anything to those claims at all, like unless I've missed something, but I don't think I have. So it isn't really the neat and tidy explanation for like all the paranormal activity that's been reported to go on there. They did get something right though. There were in fact tunnels underneath the studio that were used as an air raid shelter during World War II. Now these tunnels were incredibly safe and they became so popular as an air raid shelter that they actually had to use like a ticketing system to keep tabs on like how many people were sleeping down in the tunnels. Because it was like up to 1,400 people would pack tightly into this tunnel each night to keep themselves safe. After the war, these tunnels were bricked up and like over the years, like water seeped back in. So if you're a believer of the theory that like water can amplify spiritual energy, then this may sort of help to explain why the cast and crew were experiencing so much paranormal activity on this set. But from what I could tell, there were no like tragic deaths, accidents, or like long forgotten torture chambers ever on this site. So should we get into what was reported? Yeah, let's do that. A lot of paranormal activity seems to be centered around Studio 1, which was like a big studio that contained like all of the interior sets. So one set in particular was said to be extremely haunted. Some cast members have had terrifying experiences in the bar area of the Rover's Return set, like inside Studio 1. Dark shadows have been seen like darting around the bar, and some actors even report being touched and pushed behind the bar. There's also another area in Studio 1 where loads of people like really don't like, and that's the loading dock door area. It's described as having like a real heavy, like oppressive atmosphere, with people often reporting like this very intense feeling that like something evil is watching them. It's not a nice feeling. Some cast members refused to walk down like different corridors alone, especially once it had gone dark. One corridor that they really hated was the gallery corridor in Studio 2. Apparently it just had this like really heavy, spooky atmosphere that would just like put you on edge. But it didn't matter where you were. Disembodied footsteps or like unexplained noises had a tendency to follow you around, especially once it was dark. So what was actually haunting the old Coronation Street set? Apparently, it was the old stars of the show had returned after they died. And I mean, it makes sense though, doesn't it? Like, I'd imagine soap stars, they spend most of their time on set. Like, they're always like recording to like stay ahead of schedule. So why wouldn't that be the place that they come back to? So there have been claims of like some of the earliest cast members have been seen at the old studios, including Jean Alexander, who played Hilda Ogden from 1964 to like 1987, and Pat Phoenix, who played Elsie Tanner from 1960 to 1984. Most Haunted also claimed that there had been the figure of a woman with long brown hair seen on the studios, but I couldn't really find any other sources or anything to back it up. And so for over 30 years, cast and crew members, they continued to get like freaked out by these creepy old studios. But on the 20th of December 2013, the final scenes were filmed at Quay Street as a brand new studio had been built at Media City over on the Manchester Ship Canal, which was about like 10 minutes away from the old place. But that wasn't quite the end of Quay Street, as it opened back up in April 2014 as a tourist attraction. So you know the deal, like go and walk the cobbles that like your favourite soap stars have been on and all that. But that wouldn't last long, as in 2015, planning permission was submitted to demolish the old Quay Street set to make way for more outdoor filming and parking for production vehicles. But before it was demolished though, ITV decided to throw like this huge wrap party, which I think is quite cute. Like it's the end of an era type thing. Like you've filmed on this set for like decades at this point. Like it's a nice way to sort of say goodbye. And basically it was like this 3-day festival that took place at the end of April 2017 with tribute bands playing on each of the 3 days. So there was like a Take That, a Lionel Richie and an Oasis tribute bands. But the old studios weren't quite done with creeping people out. One of the tribute bands, which was hired to play, I don't know which one, but they refused to perform unless an exorcism was done. I know, by a Catholic priest. Like a proper job exorcism. Apparently the band had heard like really strange banging noises during their rehearsals, and some of their equipment even exploded. They'd looked around the studios to like see if they could recreate the noises, like seeing if there was any wind about or anything, but there was no explanation. This was enough to absolutely terrify the band members, and they went back to the organisers of like the festival saying, "We ain't playing unless you get this studio exorcised." So a Catholic priest was called in, an exorcism was done, so that everyone was happy and the festival went ahead as planned. But that's not the end of the story, because apparently the new studio also has unexplained activity. So the new Coronation Street set is built in a location with a lot of history, because Manchester Ship Canal, it's like a huge man-made, like 36-mile long waterway where a lot of men did die since its construction began in like 1887. There were some horrific disasters that happened on the canal, including an explosion from spilt petrol and a loaded train car ploughing into workers and just like taking a bunch of them out. But I couldn't find anything specific that happened in like the immediate area of the new ITV studios. That still hasn't stopped the stories of the old Granada studios from like moving over into the new set. And there have been even more cast members seen on the cobbles after they've died in this new set. In 2015, Bill Roach and Beverly Callard, who play Ken Barlow and Liz McDonald, they both said that they could like feel the spirit of Anne Kirkbride, who'd played Deirdre Barlow, so like Ken Barlow's wife, after she had died of breast cancer earlier that year. They said that they could feel her energy and that it felt like strongest in the Barlow house, which makes sense as that's where her character lived. But Deirdre wasn't the only spirit that showed up for work on the new set. An apparition of Johnny Briggs, who played Mike Baldwin, he was also apparently witnessed on set in the new location after he died in 2021. An unnamed source from ITV reported that a few other like unexplained things happened too that they thought was down to the spirit of Johnny Briggs. Apparently like prop bottles of scotch were moved around the sets like completely on their own, which was Mike Baldwin's favourite drink during his time on screen. Whiffs of cigar smoke had also been reported, which obviously like the set would have been non-smoking, so like why would there have been this unmistakable smell of cigars? Then pair that with the fact that Mike Baldwin's catchphrase in the 90s was, "A pack of my cigars, please." Now this one I find really interesting, as Mike Baldwin last appeared on screen in 2006, so Johnny Briggs, the actor, never would have worked at the new set. But Johnny Briggs died in 2021, and the reports only started after that date. So it's interesting that all of this unexplained activity happened here. Maybe it was a familiar place for his spirit, so like that's where he was drawn to, like, I don't know. So alongside alleged paranormal activity being reported, it seems like the new set had actually put a curse on Coronation Street, although I'm not entirely convinced on this one. After moving, the cast and crew, they had like a big flu outbreak, which saw like loads of characters going off sick. They were also beaten at the British Soap Awards by EastEnders, which, in case you're not from the UK, is basically like just another massive soap that's over here. And then they lost like a bunch of cast members who moved on to other things. So like Craig Charles, Alison King, and Chris Gascoigne, like they all left within relatively quick succession of one another. But like really, are those things really a curse? I mean, I think that might have just been like a running joke when something else happened, like, you know, like, oh, we must be cursed, lol. And then the tabloids sort of like take that entirely out of context. I think that might have been more what happened there. And so it seems that even after being in their new location, in the new studios for almost 10 years now, the same old characters are still turning up for work on the cobbles and creeping out the living. But what do you think? Do you think that either or both of the Coronation Street sets are haunted? Are the cast and crew cursed? Please let me know your thoughts down below. I absolutely love reading other people's ghost experiences. With this one, there was a lot of like sensationalism and patchy details with this one, which is bound to happen when most of the information is coming from like tabloid newspapers, but it was still really fun to look into. Like, obviously I grew up knowing a lot of these characters, so to know that like these things are being reported, like it was just kind of neat. I do think that out of all of it though, definitely the second set, the old Granada studios, I think that was haunted. For so many people to report that like ominous presence in certain corridors or like even certain areas of a set, I think there definitely is something there. But like I think the stories passed down through cast members through the years may have been like built up and like exaggerated, so then it becomes like this whole thing. They're expecting it to be haunted, but even if that is the case, I don't doubt for a second that with all that history and that emotion tied to the set, that there probably is some sort of paranormal activity going on there. Is the new location cursed? That one I'm not quite sure about. Like, sometimes you just go through a string of bad luck, and the things that were reported, like cast leaving, are normal things that you can expect to go through. Like, if it was a string of like freak accidents or unexplained technical malfunctions, then that might be a bit more compelling, but not winning awards and cast members leaving, I don't think that's got anything to do with a curse or like the paranormal. And then this one was interesting, the spirits of previous cast members that have died being experienced on set. So like Liz and Ken feeling Deirdre's presence in the Barlow house. I mean, maybe they did. I don't want to discredit their experiences if that's what they believe. But as an outsider, looking at what's reported, I would be thinking about it more from like an emotional standpoint. And like, let's not forget that Bill Roach and Anne Kirkbride had been working together on Coronation Street since 1972, up until like she left in 2014. That's over 40 years of working together as a fictional husband and wife. Beverly Callard and Anne, they'd been working together for almost 25 years, so that's not a short amount of time either. And yeah, like the location of the set had changed, but Ken and Deirdre's house had not. That was still the Barlow house, filled with the memories of acting and working alongside Anne. If other cast members were going to feel the presence of Anne anywhere, it was going to be in the place that represented her character more than anywhere else. But on the other hand, speaking as someone that really wants to believe in the paranormal, if these cast members are gonna return anywhere, they might choose to go somewhere so familiar where they probably had like the best times of their lives and they spent a huge part of their working life. So it could be entirely possible that they end up back on the cobbles. Splinters, sitting on the fence again. But that is just my opinion and I could go back and forth forever. So please do let me know what you think. Either way, I still had a lot of fun looking into this one. Before I get into some really big ones coming in the next couple of days, like they're gonna be huge. They're gonna be so huge. The outlines, I just need to make sure that you're comfy when you sit down with me tomorrow because we're going to be there a while, okay? So thank you so much for sitting and chatting with me today. And if you enjoyed this story, I would be forever grateful if you would hit the like button on this video. And I would love to see you back here for another story sometime. So maybe, I don't know, if you would like to, then you might want to subscribe. And if there are any other like haunted places or stories that you would like me to cover, please do let me know. I am always up for learning about new spooky, ooky places. But that is all from me today. I cannot wait to chat with you more tomorrow. So until next time, sleep safe. Oh, we didn't check the recording the whole way through. That was lucky.